I'd like to begin with gratitudes. It's great to be speaking late in this program because I have the privilege and benefit of being able to build on the very generous and wise contributions that so many of you have made. I also want to take this chance to express gratitude to those who have brought us together and organized this so beautifully. Archbishop Sarando, Jeff, Bill, Scott, Tony, thank you very much. I want to begin by returning to one of the main threads, and I think important threads of our conversation yesterday, which was the importance of addressing root causes. If you will recall that part of our conversation, there seemed to be consensus that that is true. And also a consensus seemed to be emerging that as we think about root causes, war, failure of economic development, environmental degradation, certainly are at the top of the list and demand urgent responses. And we talked about both the moral exhortation that faith leaders can provide in support of response, and also concrete policy responses. You'll remember a particular discussion about what could be done if our developed countries could make a significant shift of resources from defense, offense, let's put it for what it is, to development. And that is certainly true. And I want to lend my support to the sense that faith communities and those of us as faith leaders have a deep responsibility to commit to that moral exhortation and that public policy advocacy. But, and this is the real focus of my comments, I want to hasten to say that the important, I think, profound contribution that our faith communities can bring to this discussion and to discussion of the other existential threats that humanity faces is that the root cause is in fact far deeper and of a very different character. I think one of the powerful shared affirmations of all of our traditions is that the root cause of human suffering does not lie outside, but inside. That it resides not in the external world, but in closed human hearts that are trapped in ego and self, unawakened human consciousness that's trapped in a false sense of separation and fear. And I want to hasten from that diagnosis to say that the other powerful shared affirmation of all our traditions is that there is a way out, a way forward. All of our traditions offer the deep existential hope that there is a path to transformation that can open our hearts and our minds, awaken our minds so profoundly that both we as individuals and we as a global community can move from suffering to flourishing. I'd like to suggest that this is not only a profound spiritual and theological insight, but it is the most practical, important practical insight in our world today, because it is the only insight that can truly empower humanity to meet all of the existential threats of the 21st century. And lest that sound like a grand and ungrounded proposition, I want to ground it in some reflections on the current state of my country, the United States. Again, I will return to a portion of our root cause conversation yesterday. The easy observation that the United States is spending 3.3% of GDP on defense and 0.17% of GDP on development, and if only we could make a significant shift in resources. I would suggest that that is a meaningless observation unless we go on in a very clear-eyed and honest way to ask the question, what would it take in the realpolitik world that we exist for that to happen? I've spent 35 years living inside the Washington public policy world, been in countless conversations about how we need to fix the problem through reforming our system of campaign finance or our system of congressional redistricting. I would submit that in the wake of our recent campaign, we need to recognize the complete unreality of those conversations, not because those reforms are not an important part of the ultimate solution, but precisely because our civic space has become so toxic and polarized that unless we can depolarize it and return to civility, there is absolutely zero chance that any of those important systemic reforms will be enacted. So let's consider what has drawn us to this point. The election, this recent campaign and its result are simply the dramatic manifestation of a polarization and growing animosity that has been building in our country for at least the past 30 years. We have, over much of that period, had prominent political leaders, but I must say also too often prominent religious leaders, encouraging us to think that those who disagree with us are not only wrong, but evil, that those who are different are a threat to fear, and too many Americans have been willing to buy into that mentality of separation and fear. Is there any prospect that it will get better? I would submit, if we look at the trends that are currently in motion, the answer is no, it will get worse. An example from our political leadership. You may recall, I think it probably got coverage internationally, that at a time when President Trump was aggressively, even viciously attacking the Democrats, our former First Lady Michelle Obama said, "When they go low, we go high. Our response should be a virtuous response." In the wake of the defeat, there's been a discussion among Democratic national leaders, and they have decided that that is backwards, that when they go low, we have to go even lower, and that has been manifested in public rhetoric coming from the Democratic leadership in recent months. We also, as you know, have media that has become a huge part of the problem. Each side has its own polarizing media and its social media. And furthermore, the countervailing institutions that we have historically relied on for the positive spiritual and moral formation of Americans, that is to say the family, faith communities, and education, have been steadily and significantly losing their capacity to do that. This story does not end well for America or for the world. So the question is, what then are we to do? And I would submit, and I think it is tremendously important to submit it here, that the only thing that can reverse this decline and ultimately disintegration is a powerful and profound movement within the United States for spiritually grounded individual and societal renewal. That is the only practical option. A vignette. Last week I heard an interview with our Secretary of Defense. The reporter asked him what keeps him awake at night. He said, "The United States of America. We are engaged in a significant spiritual and moral crisis." Interesting, true, profound. So I would like to share, on the optimistic side, we and partners are joining in a bold effort to catalyze what we're calling a national movement to heal the heart of American democracy. This is a paper that describes the effort. There's a black and white copy for anyone who's interested. The first move that we make is to suggest we absolutely have to reformulate this as a spiritual and moral crisis, a crisis of virtue. We have to recognize that a flourishing free society is a moral and spiritual achievement, and we have to set about renewing. How do we do that? We begin by finding the leaders across every sector of American life who are passionately committed to that vision. It's happening. We are working now with the largest national association of leaders in the voluntary sector. They've, for decades, had a leadership program. It's leadership development program. It's been an instrumental program. How can voluntary sector leaders stand back, understand the problems, and come up with the interventions that will fix the problems and the people? This association is now going to lift up at its next meeting that leadership development program now has to include a spiritual dimension of inner work, because the leaders cannot go out and be agents of healing and reconciliation if they are coming, as many do, from a place of ego, fear, anger, brokenness. So they've asked us to work with them to build the infrastructure nationally, place-based and web-based, to support the inner spiritual work of literally tens of thousands of voluntary sector leaders. We are in the process of inviting and convening a group of American faith leaders from across the faith spectrum, which in the United States means across the political spectrum, to come together and reflect on the role of faith leaders and faith communities. I am deeply hopeful, I pray every day, that they will recognize the tremendous central role of faith communities in this effort in calling their faithful to this great effort of healing and reconciliation. Now I want to step back from the U.S. situation and offer some broad reflections to this group on what the world's faith communities can bring to the global crisis. We've come together to talk about the shared ethical and moral principles across our faith traditions and to discuss their practical policy implications for addressing, in this instance, the problem of refugees and migrants. That's important work to be celebrated and advanced. But I would suggest that it is even more important for us to come together and explore the deep convergence of our traditions on two other levels. The first is the deep ontological level of our understanding of the fundamental nature of reality. Too often, religion is perceived by the global community as offering wildly different, conflicting explanations of fundamental reality, and we allow that perception to persist. When instead, I would submit that we need to be coming together to affirm the deep ontological convergence of our traditions around the existence of a transcendent dimension of reality that links us in fundamental unity and sacredness, that creates the space for our freedom as moral agents, and that has at its core, as part of the very fabric of reality, compassion, love, mercy, so that we can truly tell our children that when we ask you to commit to love, we are not asking you to take a defiant step in the face of a meaningless reality, but instead are saying, this is how you bring your life into fundamental alignment with the deepest reality. That is our shared ontological convergence. And yes, at the first level, our metaphysics differ. We would be surprised if they didn't, because we are probing mystery. St. Paul tells us we see through a glass darkly. The glass is opaque. None of us can expect to see with total clarity the outline of the divine. But the glass is not completely opaque, and our traditions over the millennia have discerned the truly vital, deep, life-affirming truths about spirit, about God, about the divine. We need to offer that as our gift of guidance and ontological grounding to our world. And at a higher level, if we have an ontological convergence and then a moral convergence, The capstone is our convergence on the nature and process for profound inner transformation. All of our traditions agree that the fundamental nature of that is a transformation from ego and separation and fear to wholeness and love and interconnection. All of our traditions also agree that that is not easy, that that is the profound work of a lifetime. And all of our traditions have developed paths, practices, supportive spiritual communities that are the only way that we can help tens and hundreds of millions of our fellow brothers and sisters around the world, and ourselves, because we enter this with great humility, to take that essential step from separation, ego, and fear to wholeness and love. So I hope that our conversations in this precious opportunity over the course of our, remaining 6 or 7 times together, can go beyond exploring the ethical consensus that can inform our action, but also the deep ontological consensus that can bring existential hope and the profound importance of spiritual transformation. And I would like to close with some words of the Holy Father, Pope Francis, from Laudato Si', where he focuses on the central importance of inner transformation. In section 202, he writes, "Many things have to change course, but it is we human beings, above all, that need to change." In section 231, he says, "Social love, parentheses, not public policy, is the key to authentic development. In order to make society more human, more worthy of the human person, love in social life, political, economic, and cultural life, must be given renewed value, becoming the constant and highest norm of all activity." And then finally in section 216, and he's speaking within the Christian context, but I think each of the traditions could make the same statement. "The rich heritage of Christian spirituality, the fruit of 20 centuries of personal and communal experience, has a personal is essential. A personal commitment this lofty cannot be sustained by doctrine alone, without a spirituality capable of inspiring us, without an interior impulse which encourages, motivates, nourishes, and gives meaning to our individual and communal activity." Thank you.